Hello, I'm Samantha Davis, and this is my OT 630 in-service on cultivating self-awareness. Before we get started, there are 3 learning objectives that I'm going to go over. The first is following this in-service, learners will accurately define self-awareness in their own words. This is different from person to person. It can be unique in what you feel or think when someone says, "How self-aware are you?" Our second is learners will know how self-aware they are. So there will be an aptitude test for you to take at the end of this in-service that gives you a subtype, and this is based on the journal article I read for this in-service. The authors of that journal article wrote a book, and they also came up with this entrepreneurial aptitude test, or EAT for short. So this will be required of you to take after the in-service. I also took it, and then once you have turned in your results and everyone's turned them in, I'm going to crunch the numbers and I'm going to let you guys know similarities between you and your classmates, and then which of the 4 main subtypes are more prevalent in our class. The third is learners will be able to identify at least 3 ways to cultivate self-awareness. So I will cover these 3 main ways in this in-service, and even those 3 ways have little branches that come off on more ways to cultivate self-awareness. So the bottom line is there are a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways to define it. There's a lot of ways to cultivate it. So what I've been alluding to, let's get started. So first and foremost, I will define what is self-awareness. So according to the American Psychological Association, self-awareness theory, yes, it has its own theory, is the consequences of focusing attention on the self. So whatever you're getting out of doing the simple act of reflecting or looking inwards is self-awareness. Now there's other definitions out there, and like I said, after all of this is over, you may have a little bit of a different way to define that, or just define what it means to be self-aware. So why is self-awareness important, and why are we talking about it today? So we learn self-awareness as early as 18 months old. If you think back to our pediatrics classes, babies are so stimulated by the reflection in the mirror. If you've ever seen a baby look at themselves in the mirror, it's the cutest thing in the world. They smile, and they'll even touch the mirror. They'll play in front of it, and they don't actually realize until around 18 months old that that reflection is themselves. So even as adults, we look at mirrors every time we pass. We care about how we present ourselves to other people. Maybe not all people, but we do have a subconscious as well as a conscious way of ensuring that we're at least presentable, or at least just looking to make sure everything looks normal or there's nothing in our teeth. So we as humans also are naturally drawn to some people. Think about it. You've walked into a room and sometimes you can just tell the people that you're going to mesh really well with, or the people that maybe you're going to butt heads with. This is natural. We're not meant to get along with everybody. So I think in order to understand that whole concept, you have to cultivate some sort of self-awareness so you're better able to understand how you as an individual fit into the world. And that can be within your peer group, working, friendships, family, etc. We spend our whole life making teams for different aspects of our lives. So even as young as choosing who you want to come to your birthday party, just friend groups in general, picking people for our wedding parties, workplace friends, etc. It's important to know where you stand within that specific group and your role and what things you're going to bring to the group. It's also important to understand your own individual strengths and weaknesses. So I know that's something that's thrown around all the time. What's your strength? What's your weakness? Being able to know those so you're better able to adapt your behavior to your surroundings. And I'll give you an example. Say it's your first week into your level 2 fieldwork and you're notoriously someone with poor time management skills. You know that's one of your weaknesses, you've come to terms with it, but instead of just chalking it up to, well, that's just who I am, you can instead be proactive and do things necessary to not necessarily turn it to a strength, because we're not miracle workers, but instead do some things or put some things into practice to help that weakness of yours. Like I said, we aren't striving to be perfect, we're striving to be better. Another thing is these can apply to everyday scenarios with people in and outside of the workplace. Once we become practitioners, believe it or not, we will have a life again. If you're the friend who talks over people or never lets them get a word in edgewise, maybe stand back and listen more. Most well-known and well-liked, being the key word, people in the world or leaders in the world are really good at finding a balance, because balance is key. But it all starts with being able to be aware, knowing what things are your strengths and what things are your weaknesses to begin with. I read a really good quote in our textbook that kind of paralleled what I'm talking to you about, so I wanted to read this quote to you. It says, "Through self-reflection, the novice occupational therapist can adapt and identify proactive strategies that enhance adjustments and integration into the new environment. Being self-aware and regularly practicing in self-reflection can help us as new graduates in the field. Knowing what type of learner, communicator, and person we are when we're faced with challenges can ensure that we're more proactive than reactive in situations. Making these small adjustments as we go is vital, and this is something we can even work on with our clients as well." So how do we cultivate self-awareness? So I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about 3 things. So the first thing is test and know yourself better. The second is watch yourself and learn. And the third is be aware of others too. So test and know yourself better. There are many tests out there, one of which each of you will be taking after this video. And there's so many characteristics out there that people say is the one thing you need to be successful. Is it funny? Is it smart? Is it a good communicator? Well, there's one that trumps them all, and the authors of the article I read says that it's, as you guessed it, self-awareness. So I mentioned that there's a lot of different tests, and some of them we've probably taken, maybe some of you've taken in your own spare time. It's Myers-Briggs is one, the Predictive Index, Strength Finder, maybe the Enneagram. There's so many. Now these aren't perfect, but they do facilitate self-reflection, which in turn leads to better self-awareness. So they're a great place to start. Just remember to be honest when you're filling them out, and you will gain insight into what core features guide your decision-making and your overall attitude. Now the second is watch yourself and learn. So the article went into great detail about how a very few successful business people will write down if they make an investment or any sort of really big decision, when they did it, what motivated them, and what they think the outcome will be. Then they check back in 9 to 12 months later and see if what they thought would happen really did. So this is called feedback analysis, and it's the key to effectiveness in this is to codify rationale and motivations, and then go back and reflect and assess the outcomes. Now, you may not be making any big decisions or investments anytime soon, but I think you could translate this into journaling, just writing things out. Put how you're feeling onto paper and go back and read it. Imagine how different your week 1 of fieldwork words would be from your week 12. Backward realization, or the act of thinking backwards to find answers, is a downward spiral. And it's often fruitless, trying to remember why you did things or how you did them. But often, if you have a paper trail of sort, it can help you realize what actually happened and can help people progress forward instead of staying stagnant. And the third one is being aware of other people too. This comes into play when you are team building, like real life dodgeball. Choosing members on your team that balance each other is the real key. You want people around you who either bring out the best in you or people who bring something else to the table. That maybe they don't think the same way you do, or maybe just someone who has a personality or has a trait and something that you really like. Also tell them. If you see something in a peer or a coworker that you think they're really good at, let them know. They may not know that, and that can help their self-awareness as well. So no one person can be above average in all the things. Think about OT. There's no one OT out there who's great at pediatrics, geriatrics, neonates, brain injury, hip replacements. It's just, that's not the case. So being able to strive for better, of course, but you can't do it all. So the best teams are rarely made up of similar types of people. Diversity is so important here. Having good people who think in different ways to achieve common goals in different ways encourages everyone to become more open-minded, because often there's no one right way to do something. So those are the 3 things to cultivate self-awareness. And there's another quote that was in the article that I read, and I really liked it, and I think it really summed up the whole concept of cultivating self-awareness. So it's know thyself, improve thyself, and complement thyself. Now these can seem very straightforward, but self-awareness can be really sticky and scary for some people because not a lot of people like self-reflection. I think it's because maybe they're afraid to find out things they already know about themselves that they don't really like. But just like we tell our patients not to wait until they need services because it only makes the problem worse and harder to treat, the same goes for ourselves. Start today, start now, because it will only make you a better friend, spouse, possible parent, and definitely a practitioner in the very, very, very near future. So, now that the in-service is over, what I need from you guys is to take the entrepreneurial aptitude test. There's a link at the bottom of your note-taking guide. Save your results, read through your results, and then take the knowledge check. The link is also at the bottom of the note-taking guide. It's due Sunday at 11:59, and then after that, be sure to look out for the results of everybody in our class. I'm really excited about these. I will be crunching the numbers and actually comparing them to the article, who took a big pool of like the top business leaders in, I'm not sure the world or America, but either way, and crunched those numbers and assigned them to the 4 different subtypes. So I'm really excited to compare them. So thank you, everybody.